Hello YouTube, Dave here again. Welcome to another installment in Dragon Hoard, a series where I flip through all of the Dragon magazines that I have in my collection. In the last episode, I should say, we took a look at issue number 278 from December of 2000. Today we are taking a look at the January 2001 issue of Dragon magazine, issue number 279. The last issue was dedicated to dwarves, and this issue is dedicated to elves. So we have elves, drow slayers, new gear for elves, and an elven language primer. We also have Loth Strikes Back, the Spider Queen's Elite Killers, the Sleeping Tide, which appears to be one of the articles of fiction, short stories that were written in these magazines. Also, we've got druids and monks. 5 new feats, 23 unlikely options, and 77 animal companions. We also have Damodar Speaks, so another preview article for the, at the time, upcoming and highly anticipated Dungeons and Dragons movie. So let's just get right into this, shall we? Again, we're not going to read through every single article, but we may focus on a couple of things that kind of strike me as I go through. We're definitely going to take a look at this interview with, I think it was Bruce Payne, who played Damodar. I'm wondering if they mentioned the blue lipstick in the interview or not. So here we have an advertisement for Breath of Fire 4 for the PlayStation. I've tried playing Breath of Fire 1 on the Switch online, and I didn't get very far in it. We do have our reproduced cover art here, and that is very much a drow. I don't think it's supposed to be. Actually, no. I think it's supposed to be Dritz. It's hard to say. He has a purple cloak instead of the green cloak that we would know, but that does look kind of scimitar-ish on his belt. In fact, there's another one there, so it's hard to say. But again, just really nice artwork. I love the fact that they are reproducing the covers inside of the magazine. Something that I think they kind of got away from, but eventually worked their way back to it. Here we have Star Trek Starfleet Command. So PC game, sort of based off of, I think, like the tabletop game. Interesting stuff. Age Before Beauty. Again, we're not going to look at the editorial here in this video. That might be something I do in a future series where I just kind of read through them and share my thoughts on them. Here we have Scale Mail, again, the letter section where people can write in with their observations, questions, or in a lot of cases, their concerns. Again, something that I might hold off for in a future video, going through and reading some of the letters. Evergrace, so another PS. So this is a PlayStation 2 ad. Was this PlayStation or PlayStation 2? I mean, this was 2001. It had to be PlayStation 2, right? It just doesn't say PS2 on there. But yeah, so another PlayStation RPG, which is totally fine. Interesting that, I'm wondering, again, like a couple of issues back in the series, they had advertisements for Insane Clown Posse and Twisted. And those really felt out of place. I wonder if we're going to see any more of those types of ads. And then we got What's This Guy's Story, pointing to some random character in the background here. An advertisement for the Star Wars role-playing game, the D20 Star Wars, put out by Wizards of the Coast. Advertisements for a Dragon and Dungeon. I did, the first video in this series, I think, was actually the... I don't know. Sorry, well, I don't think it was the first video in the series, but we did do we did take a look at the issue from the first installment of the 3rd edition era. I still really want to get the first Dungeon magazine from that point as well, but one of these days. We have an Up on a Soapbox article by Gary Gygax, the elements that constitute a role-playing game. So yeah, this might be something, again, that I might focus on for a separate video. There were some of these like Up on a Soapbox articles, and I do believe that for the most part these were, maybe not reprinted. I think some of them were reprinted from earlier like magazines that they were doing, like the Strategic Review and stuff like that. But I think some of these were also actually written specifically for the magazines, because he actually does reference the Wizards of the Coast website. So that's definitely not from an issue of the Strategic Review. Upcoming convention information, so different events and what was going to be going on, what representation Wizards of the Coast was going to have. And here we have some upcoming releases. So we have Sword and Fist. This was the Splat book, the soft-covered supplement for the Fighter and the Monk. So this was during this point where they were doing these series of books for the different classes from the Player's Handbook. So you had Sword and Fist, which was Fighters and Monks. You had Song and Silence, which was Rogues and Bards. You had Tome and Blood, which was for was for sorcerers and wizards, and you had Defenders of the Faith, which were for clerics and paladins, and Masters of the Wild. That was the one with Rangers, Druids, and Barbarians. So I'll get my classes straight at some point here. And then we have The Speaker in Dreams. Again, I don't think that's the final artwork from that book, but I could be wrong because I don't own that one. I think Speaker of Dreams was... I think I actually have this adventure, but this is not the cover for it. I'll have to see because I only own one adventure from this series, but that name sounds super familiar, so I'll have to take a look. But again, that's definitely, if it is the one that I have, that's not the final artwork, which we see a lot in these previews, to be honest. Then we have Legacy of the Drow and Dragons of the Fallen Sun for some novels, back when they were really actively supporting these novels. Countdown to the Forgotten Realms. So here we learn about the Red Wizards of Thay, the Silver Marches, the Symbol, which was an NPC, Mulharund, Anarok, the former Netherese Empire, the Nati Zentarum, and says next month, join us the February issue. We take a look at the Gods of the Forgotten Realms. I'm pretty sure I have the February 2001 issue as well, so I'm looking forward to that. I hope they mention Bane because he's my favorite. Icewind Dale, Heart of Winter, so a PC game in the same vein as the Baldur's Gate 1 and Baldur's Gate 2. Reaper Miniatures, Dork Tower. Again, if you haven't read Dork Tower, you really should. Leaf and Thorn, The Secret Life of Elves. So again, similar to the Dwarf one, I'm not going to go over this article too much in this video because I think I would rather do a video kind of just focusing on the specific races that I have, not only the magazines for, but also the hardcover books from 3.5 that also deal with things like, Races of the Wild, for example, goes into information on like Elven society and culture, and it'll be interesting to see how similar that book may be to these articles or how different they may be. So I'm not going to focus on this one too much in this video, but I will say that these articles are some of my favorite things about like the Dragon magazines that I've been looking at so far, because it's just wonderful world building flavor text that kind of became less and less of a focus as Dragon would sort of move on into like the 3.5 era and stuff like that. So it was just really, these articles were really, really great. I haven't read this one yet, but I did go back and read some more of the Dwarf one, and I was just absolutely sort of floored by the way that they, just the level of, wonderful detail that you will probably never use in a campaign, but still cool to see nonetheless. So we got Corrupt Elves. So let's actually read Corrupt Elves. And Elven Adventure. So Elven Adventure is about 1 in 200 elves spends part of their life as a wandering adventurer in search of an exotic experience. Almost none of them devote more than a century or two to such pursuits. An elf who leaves the company of her fellows to delve through muck-encrusted dungeons with surly dwarves and impetuous humans is by definition an eccentric. Fortunately, elves celebrate individuality and treat returned adventurers with excited curiosity, not contempt or fear. So that's kind of cool. Corrupted Elves. So it reads, although the religion and culture of elves puts them at odds with the forces of evil, elves are no more immune than other species from its temptations. Demons take special pleasure in leading elves astray, which they do by making mental contact with them as they quest for their epiphanies. Some pose as Corellon the Rithian, tricking the gullible. Others offer wealth and dominance that elven society turns its back on. Self-pitying Malouin, convincing themselves that they have been cast out by the Larethian. Cast out by the faithful, I guess, are especially prone to manipulation. It does not take long for the typical elven community to notice odd behavior of an obviously cruel or insane servant of evil, but more clever types might thrive for decades, if not centuries, subtly taking advantage of a community's trust to thwart their protective efforts and allow corruption to gain a foothold around their lands. Although elven tolerance is vast, a community member who reveals his evil nature faces execution unless he escapes. So again, cool stuff. There's even a thing on elven divorce. So again, I might save that for a future video. Revenge of the Spider Queen. So these are some servants of evil. This by Monty Cook. Some servants of evil in the service of Lolth. So you got a female succubus with 6 levels of the rogue class, which is kind of neat. So you basically get some villainous NPCs that you can use with a bit of a background and description. I'm not going to go too much into them here, but there's some pretty cool stuff. We've got Jagedra Thul, a female vampiric drow half-dragon. Cleric 17, challenge rating 22. Gosh dang, they really went for it in this article. One of the things that 3rd edition did was it introduced templates, which you can apply to creatures to give them things like, again, like half-dragon was a template, vampire was a template. And there were points where the writers of both Dragon Magazine or Dungeon Magazine may have gotten a little carried away with their application of templates. I know that I had a DM who also used to get really obsessed with just stacking templates on creatures. So he had, I think at one point, he had a fiendish half-dragon minotaur of legend. So there were like 3 different templates applied to the one creature. So yeah, it got a little nuts here. So cool stuff. Let's read a little bit about Jagedra. So Loth's favorite avenger is a priestess that has served her for hundreds of years. Born the daughter of a powerful priestess and a black dragon in drow form, Jagedra served her goddess for many years, rising quickly through the ranks and eventually assassinating her own mother to obtain the position of high priestess in a major Underdark temple. She found a powerful and like-minded mate in the drow vampire named Zakrin. Zakrin eventually betrayed and slew Jagedra to get a powerful magic item, but direct intervention by the Queen of Spiders allowed her to rise as a vampire herself. So yeah, awesome stuff there. So some cool NPCs. Elven Marketplace. So we've got some new armor types. So we have Elven Leaf Armor. Elven artisans weave suits of armor from forest leaves, which are then treated by a special alchemical process that makes them tough and flexible as leather. So it's sort of a substitute for leather armor. Spell failure chances made from these treated leaves are decreased by 5%. So it's actually sort of a special material that modifies the base stats of leather armor, which is cool. Then you've got wooden armor, which takes the place of wooden armor. Let's see what we got here. Oh, it might not actually have a specific type. It might just sort of replace some of the metal armors. So these are armors that are actually sort of designed with like druids in mind, for example. So I want to say that wooden armor was kind of like scale mail that basically a druid could wear. So we've also got some elven weapons here. We've got the blunt arrow. We have the return of the flight arrow. So in 2nd edition AD&D, I can't remember if they were in 1st edition or not, but you actually had different types of arrows which had different stats for the game. You had the flight arrows, which did less damage but had a longer range that they could travel before you start suffering penalties to your attack. And then you had what were called sheaf arrows, which were just your sort of base arrow that would become the default arrow in 3rd edition. So we actually have the flight arrow come back, which is kind of cool. So the light shaft in special design of this masterwork arrow increases the bow's range increment by 25 feet. So that's kind of cool to see come back. I wonder if they have any melee weapons. I don't think they do. But you would also have certain things like Elven Thin Blades, which were essentially lighter versions of things like longswords that could be actually wielded as like an offhand weapon. So yeah, there's some really cool Elven weapons that we would get in later books, but unfortunately we don't have like the melee weapons, but we do have some new types of arrows, which is cool. And yeah, it was, I think it's kind of cool to see flight arrows make a return. And then we get the myth of elves, so legend and literature. Again, I do want to do a video dedicated specifically to the lore surrounding elves in various, products in the future. So I'm not going to dive into this too much, but we'll take a look at the recommended reading list. They had that for the dwarves as well, and a lot of them involved fairies for some reason. But here we have an encyclopedia of fairies. So that was actually one that was mentioned in the dwarf article as well. The fairies in English tradition and literature. The fairy faith in Celtic countries. Teutonic mythology. The fairy mythology, strange and secret peoples, fairies, and Victorian. I think a lot of these are actually the same books that were in the dwarf recommended reading list, and a little write-up on the drow, which again I'll save for a future video. Here we have our Elven Lexicon, so similar to the Dwarven one that we had before, just some Elvish phrases and what they translate to in common tongue and what part of vocabulary they are. So for example, the word mor, M-O-R, is to die, which is a verb. You have varan, which stands for evil and is an adjective. Let's take a look at some other ones. So nesh, which is just the word for, okay, like as in something for this. Let's see here. Ar is above, okay. Is there something do they have the word mithril in here? Because I don't think mithril is connected to elves as much in D&D. But anyway, some cool stuff in here. Again, something you'll probably never use, but it's still cool to have nonetheless. Sample phrases. Okay, I'm not going to, those are using these words. I'm not going to try to read them because I think it would probably destroy me. Here we go. So truth or Damodor. Highlander Endgame's Bruce Payne. Okay, I did get the name right. Gets Badder and Balder in the Dungeons and Dragons movie. So this actually might not be an article or an interview as such, which it kind of sucks, but it's some information about Damodor. So it says here, the big screen Dungeons and Dragons starring Jeremy Irons, Thora Birch, Justin Whalen, Marlon Wayans, Kristen Wilson, Zoe McKellen, Lee Arnberg, and Bruce Payne, to name but a few, is playing. Oh, it's in theaters by the time this issue came out. All right, here we go. As you read this article, get out there and buy your ticket if you haven't seen it yet. Bring the magazine. You can read it in line. Really pushing the movie here. Dungeons & Dragons offers not just one, but two classy actors from across the pond in the film's major villainous roles, while Academy Award winner Jeremy Irons' plotting mage Profian pulls Machiavellian strings from the city of Sumdal. His henchman Damodor mercilessly pursues a plucky band of heroes. Damodor heads the Crimson Guard. I think they were called the Crimson Brigade in the actual final. I think they were called the Crimson Brigade, like in the movie itself. But the Crimson Guard, the secret police of Sumdal, who have become an extension of Profian's power. Damodor is brought to nefarious life by actor Bruce Payne. Genre fans might recognize Payne from his recent role as Kel in Highlander Endgame, Wesley Snipes' nemesis in Die Hard on a Plane picture, Passenger 57, or perhaps from his more memorable turn as Jurgen on the television series La Femme Nikita. I recognized him from none of those things, but it's kind of cool that he was well established at this point. In Victoria, British Columbia, hey, Canada, Payne was able to speak with us about acting, his work in the Dungeons & Dragons movie, memorable roles from the past, and the finer points of dancing with a Steadicam. So growing pains. Movies appealed to Bruce from an early age. When I was a wee lad, about 2 weeks ago, a little bit of humor there, I guess, doesn't quite translate on the page, I was fascinated by the movie industry. That wee lad took this fascination seriously even then. It wasn't lightweight. I realized it was actually a vocation as opposed to a career. I think they're two very different things. We all have to live, we have to pay our bills on time, but a vocation is very different psychologically, is a very different psychological prerequisite for doing what we call acting. Despite his early start, Payne wasn't born with a script in hand. Growing up, I decided to test the water by enrolling in a school called the National Youth Theatre, an incredible establishment in London. Payne describes the experience as 400 kids thrown together to work on 7 plays. The young performer, though, had found his calling. Soon he enrolled at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art in London. Of course, you have to say the Royal... Okay, so just some weird pronunciations. I'm not going to get into that part. Payne doesn't believe that the tradition of drama in England is all that different from acting stateside or on the other side of the world. People say the traditionally trained, but you only have traditionally trained if you stay inside the lines. I never did that. From a very young age, I was exposed to no theater, Japanese films, German films, French films. I was attracted to the whole spectrum of the medium. No theater? Okay, that's a terminology. That's a term that I just don't. If that means something, let me know. Not long after completing his studies at the Academy with the Royal Command performance of the climax of the Scottish play Before the Queen, which at this point is after she had been laid to rest, the time I'm recording this video, he set out to become a working actor. Success came quickly, and Payne landed roles in a string of British films such as Privates on Parade and Absolute Beginners. Damned if you're Damodar, or Damned if you Damodar. All the film's best bad guys, except maybe Dennis Hopper, have been classically trained British actors. That's kind of true. A lot of British actors excel at playing villains. Damodar's success as a villain will ultimately rest with the audience. They knew. Payne believes the thing that will make it stand out will be the audience's reception. I truly do believe in the power of the people. An audience knows very much after sitting inside a theater for an hour how they feel. The ensemble of actors worked well together despite the extremely short resumes of a few of the cast members. I was really privileged to be among the cast that was not jaded, says Payne. A cast that wanted to make a fascinating movie based on a good, solid, old-fashioned story techniques. Okay, I'll give them that. There were definitely story techniques or, cliches coming out the wazoo in that movie. But old-fashioned story techniques is probably a better way of saying it. Again, the thing I love about these D&D movie articles is, again, you can tell that the cast, the people writing the articles, you can tell that they know that this probably won't turn out the way that they hoped when the movie was first announced, especially seeing as how the director was working on this for a decade. Referring to Jeremy Irons, character is Machiavellian, and again, Bruce Payne saying, the audience will decide how they feel after they see the movie. You can tell that they knew that this just wasn't going to be a huge success. Right, especially when you think about the fact that the Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring was coming out around this same time. There's just a huge gap in the quality of the Dungeons & Dragons movie when compared to, what ended up being the Fellowship of the Ring. So it's just, as I said, it's interesting to see just how they kind of try to phrase things in a telling way without coming out and saying it. So the veteran was especially impressed with co-star Zoe McKellen, with whom he shares an intense scene. Zoe's got a really good kind of central core to her. She's a very natural person, and unless she led me completely up the garden path, a very honest person coming from a real kind of gentle, strong center. So she was the wizard character that travels with the players. I always forget the name of the character. But yeah, she was actually not bad in the movie, I will say. She actually did a pretty decent job. A couple of the scenes, again, the dialogue wasn't, what it could have been, and it felt like there were just scenes that were missing, really, overall. But I will say that she did a pretty decent job. Justin Whalen also did a pretty, decent job as well, given the material that he had to work with. So then we got Practice Makes Perfect. Payne believes that the preparation time director Courtney Solomon built into the production schedule pays off on screen. Okay. We were blessed with the fact that Corey purloined and secured a sensible time to just work. Not so much rehearsal, but sitting around a table day in and day out, working through the script. It is the way it should be done. Interesting way of saying that the script was changing as they were filming the movie, apparently. Unfortunately, as Payne knows, such work time must come from somewhere, and producers aren't crazy about rehearsal as a rule. I really do believe that most producers have a creative element inside of them that wants to make a great picture. I really believe that, Payne insists. I've known a lot of producers over the years who like to say, what a wonderful story, as long as it doesn't cost too much. Again, I love how subtle they're trying to be. So again, saying that they want to make a good movie as long as it doesn't cost too much. A lot of the props in the movie looked really cheap, like Damodor's armor, which clearly looked like it was made out of plastic and not metal. The dwarf's axe, also didn't look great in most scenes. So again, I love the subtle points that they're trying to make as maybe a potential warning about the movie. One of these days, I need to talk about the D&D movie. I really do. Combat readiness. Payne has developed a reputation for talent with the blade, and he gets ample opportunity to show those skills in this film. I think he uses his sword twice. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he only uses his sword twice. But anyway, I guess I'm very much a little boy at heart. I love those swashbuckler movies. We've seen them 100 times. Fortunately, I went to a classical drama school, he says. During my studies, I learned the short sword, dagger, EP? Foil, broadsword, foil's the fencing sword, broadsword, you name it. Payne, who had the privilege to know some great fight choreographers, wasn't content with that, however, and has never completely stopped his stage combat training. Whenever he can, he fences in LA and tries to pick up something new with each swashbuckling film. Beyond weapons, clothes often make the villain. Damodor is outfitted with only the best and evil equipment. Naturally, the costume was the closest of any to the original design. Again, that doesn't mean anything unless you knew what the original designs were. The armor, says Payne, produces an almost samurai Joan of Arc period look to the character. The breastplate is very gladiatorial, all the way down to the stomach part. I look like an armadillo. So the armor itself was actually, it was cool in concept. It just looked like it was made out of plastic. That was really the only problem with it. I mean, you can even see in this picture here, like, it doesn't look metal. But like the design was cool. It looked kind of menacing, but you could just tell that it was made out of a cheaper material. So then there was the gauntlet. It was just incredible, the workmanship. The workmanship was amazing. It's actually quite beautiful, though underneath it had this ominous presence, these little holes that were actually made of the face of this kind of strange-looking beast. Okay, so yeah, the gauntlet that he has in his hand there, it was carved to look like some sort of monstrous creature. So yeah, it was. So he's like asking, like, what's going to come out of there? So he fences and thinks fantastic armor is cool, but is he a role player? Payne's hectic schedule doesn't leave time for leisure activities such as gaming. When he does game, it tends to be electronic, Myst and Riven. I'm a big fan of, I had the time to play games, or if I had the time to play games, they'd probably detract from what I do. Some I could play forever. He'll also drop a quarter or two for the sake of entertainment. If I'm in the city and I haven't been there in a while, I know this really good arcade. We'll be down there in a heartbeat. So, yeah. Again, most of the actors in the movie, I think in most of the D&D movies, don't actually play the tabletop RPG, but, they don't necessarily need to be a gamer to be able to do a good job in a fantasy movie. And one of the things, like I said, I will say about the second movie, is they did spend more time with the actors actually going over character abilities from the actual role-playing books. Like you can actually see they have like the player's handbook and DMG on set, as well as even the monster manual, so they can sort of visualize some of the creatures like the dragon that they were fighting. So they did a better job really hammering home the role-playing game elements in the second movie. In this one, not so much, I guess. And then Steady as She Goes. So some speculate that Payne might be planning to direct a film soon. There are so many aspects of filmmaking that I just think are incredible. I think the camera is an amazing instrument. It can do so much for you as an actor. It's like being inside a conversation. It's like another character in the film. Embracing knowledge of film's technical aspects, he believes, can only help an actor. The more you can understand about it, the more you can dance with it, because that's what you're doing. You're dancing, especially if you're working with a Steadicam. For now, Payne's career as an actor shows no signs of slowing down. He actually would return in the second movie as well. Unfortunately, he's not at liberty to name current projects, saying only it's two humongous things, but I can't talk about them yet. I don't know what he was actually in. I'll have to look up his filmography. Security is getting out of control, says Payne. It's weird. It's a weird world we live in. If only he knew what it would be like 20 some odd years later. I mean, most of the scripts that I have the serial numbers printed all over every single page. You will go to jail. You will have to suffer the death. Well, okay, you won't have to suffer the death penalty, but he's basically saying that like leaking scripts was very much punishable in the Hollywood scene or in the world of acting. But I don't think you'd actually suffer the death penalty if you let your grandmother look at a single page. Okay, it's their money, so I'm bound by that, but it's frustrating. I wonder if he wanted to share the script because it was good or because it wasn't. Anyway, Payne would also be happy to work with director Corey Solomon again, perhaps even in another Dungeons & Dragons picture. Well, as I said, he actually does appear in the second one, but I don't think it was. I think it was a different director. I don't think it was the same director. I could be wrong. I'll actually have to look that up. He appreciated how the director relied on his actors for ideas and valued their input. He would share things, says Payne. He's the director. That's always number one. But like a head chef, he's in charge of the kitchen. You bring the part that you're asked to bring to it. When you're trusted this much, then it leads to even more collaboration. More comes out. Some people are incredibly intimidated by it, which I think is a bizarre situation. Why would you want to be involved if you're going to be intimidated by it? You want to be intimidated by someone getting in the ring with Mike Tyson. So there you go. That was the article or the interview with Bruce Payne. And Damodar was not a bad character. There you see the earworms. Also, I don't know how well it's going to show up on camera there, but there's the earworms. Damodar wasn't a bad character. Like, I think Bruce Payne was probably one of the best performances in the movie. The blue lipstick, which they try to not show with the screenshots by kind of having his face hidden in shadow here, that really kind of undercut a lot of the menace that the character had. Again, I don't know what they were going for with that, because like he was obviously a human. So I don't know, like, if they were trying to make him look like he was some sort of other fantasy race. Like I said, the representation of D&D creatures in the D&D movie was lacking at best. So maybe he was supposed to be something other than human. I don't know if there's something that actually had his like character stats in one of the issues or not. But yeah, Bruce Payne's like performance was actually really good. He was like I said, he was the best part of the movie in a lot of cases. And he was the only returning actor for the second movie, so I think that speaks volumes. But you can tell that the actors involved, the people writing these articles, like you can tell that they were aware that the D&D movie was not going to live up to the several months, if not years, of hype that had been built up around the concept of a D&D movie. So you have it there. I really do wish also that they would have talked more about the D&D movie. Like this is really the only section that kind of covers like the movie itself. And it's not even really diving into the character. With other ones, I think with Justin Whalen, I want to say that he spent more time talking about the Ridley character, including some of the background elements that never really got brought up in the film, but yeah, this is more about just talking to Bruce about his life as opposed to really focusing on the D&D movie. And even that might be very telling as well. Like maybe I think they realize that this probably isn't going to go over well, like a lead balloon sort of thing. So they kind of just spent their time talking about anything and everything. But it would have been nice to have been able to get like his take on the Damodar character and get into the mindset of the character. So again, it's a cool article, I guess, but it's disappointing because I wanted to know more about the Damodar character. And you don't really get much of that here. And here we have the Unusual Suspects 3. So this is just combinations, like race class combinations for the monk and the, was it monk and druid? So I'm not going to go into all of these just because, again, like this is a long article to read because it's every race and how every race you can sort of build them around like these classes that they might not necessarily be. But let's just take a look at a Dwarf Monk, for example. They give you some sample ideas of how you can have like dwarven monks. So we got dwarves. Monks in D&D being like the Buddhist monks, the sort of like the martial arts experts that can do really ridiculous things. I got to be honest, the monk class is my least favorite in like 3rd edition, 4th edition, and 5th edition D&D. Not a huge fan of them. But some people love them. It is what it is, I guess. But for dwarves, you can have a sect of dwarves dedicated to Moradin, or dedicated to Moradin. What? A sect of dwarves dedicated to Moradin teaches. I feel like there was that probably should have been picked up in the editing. So a sect of dwarves dedicated to Moradin's teachings that the goal of existence is the perfection of the dwarven race, which can only be accomplished one dwarf at a time. Perfection, they believe, is achieved through rigid discipline that turns the body into a fine tool like a hammer or axe, and the mind into a point of stillness swayed only by compassion. This sect is made up of lawful good dwarven monks, and they can teach a unique style of unarmed combat called the Hammer Fist. See sidebar. Okay, so Hammer Fist. This is a fighting style which looks like a feat. So prerequisites, a strength of 13 and improved unarmed strike, which if you're a monk, you get that automatically. Benefit, you add 1.5 times your strength bonus to damage when you hit with an unarmed strike. This extra damage does not apply if you make a flurry of blows attack or if you are holding anything in your other hand. You must use both hands to make an attack. So, okay. So that's actually kind of cool. I don't mind that feat. Because it's something that it's like you're adding extra strength, which might sound like it's like a really good ability. It's not a bad ability at all, but I like the fact that it's only if you're making your normal attacks and not using the flurry of blows, which is one of the monk's like major class features. So I kind of like that they didn't have that take on the form of like something they could do with the flurry to make monks even more kind of ridiculous in 3rd edition 3.5 D&D. 3rd edition at this point in time. But yeah, so we've got that. Let's take a look at a Halfling Monk, just to see what we have here. So Halflings who study the monastic way typically find themselves grossly underestimated. Sure. Unlike gnomes, Halfling Monks are unlikely to laugh when this occurs. Instead, they typically respond with a key shout and a tremendous leap into battle. Surviving enemies have been heard to swear that the halflings' feet never touched the ground. While halflings rarely establish monasteries to train their unique martial traditions, they have distinct schools, each comprised of a single master and a group of students that pass on these traditions. One of the most common techniques taught in these schools is the Grasshopper Strike. So see the sidebar. Grasshopper Strike. So prerequisite, Dex 13 plus, dodge mobility, base attack bonus of 4 or higher, spring attack, 5 ranks in tumble and jump. Good God, that's a lot more than the Hammer Fist one. So the benefit is... Oh, the description says you confuse your foes by leaping around in combat, seemingly never touching the ground or standing still. Benefit, you can take 10 on a jump or tumble checks, even in the heat of combat, allowing you to jump as part of your move without making a roll. So that's pretty cool. That's a ton of prerequisites for being able to take 10 on 2 different skill checks, which sure, like that can be something useful in combat, but I feel like that's a lot that they have to get that versus like adding 1.5 times your strength on your attacks, with only needing a strength of 13 plus and an ability that you get for just being the class to begin with. So anyway, there you go. And then we've got the 77 animal companions, which is just a table showing like different companions based off of the different races. So dwarves can get like lizards, giant lizards, boars, wolverines, dire badgers, dire wolverines, a cave bear, a dire boar, and a dire bear. Elves can have monkeys, baboons, small vipers, large vipers, cheetahs, leopards, constrictor snake, giant eagle for an animal companion. Okay. Giant owl, gorilla, dire ape, lion, tiger, dire lion, giant constrictor snake, and a dire tiger. So though obviously, like you get more powerful ones as you go up in level. Let's see what halfling druids can get. So halfling druids can have cats, dogs, hawks, a pony, a riding dog, a donkey, a wolf, a light horse, black bear, heavy horse, a mule, dire bat, bison, or a dire wolf. Boy, the elf gets up to like a 16 hit dice animal companion listed. The halfling gets up to a 6 hit dice creature. And then half-orcs can have rats, jackals, dogs, vultures, hyenas, boars, wolverines. So there's some carryover here. Dire bat, So is that really 77 animal companions, or they're not 77 different animal companions, they're just 77 different animal companions. Let's take a look at a Dwarf Druid, just for an example again. Just because like the Dwarf is one of the more uncommon races for both of these classes. So we got Dwarf Druids. So just as Dwarven Rangers, called Cavers, adept at the ways of the wilderness, a warrior to the wild places underground, so do some Dwarven Druids revere spirits of nature that reside in the earth and stone of their subterranean homes. These deep druids have a close relationship to earth elementals and animals of the world. They know more than perhaps any other creature about the complex ecosystems from mosses to fungi, to mind flayers and dragons that sustain life underground. So that's kind of neat. So again, just some ideas for how to basically be a member of any race with any class combination, because again, that was something that was new to 3rd edition. In all of the previous editions of D&D, each of the demi-human races, the non-human races, were limited in what classes they could play, and even how high a level they could get in each of those classes. So with 3rd edition, this was the first time that any race could be any class and progress to any level. And again, in say like D&D Basic Expert or the Rule Cyclopedia, for example, humans could be the classes of fighter, magic user, cleric, or thief, but things like dwarves and elves, they were their own specific classes, and they couldn't choose to be like, you couldn't have a dwarf cleric, for example, you just had a dwarf. You couldn't have an elven thief. The elf was basically a combination of fighter and magic user, and the halfling was essentially a thief, but not as good. So they really did want to hammer home with these early issues in the 3rd edition era that, hey, you can be any class now with any character race. And here's some ideas, because, you know, you may not have really thought about in the past having a dwarf wizard or a half-orc monk or things like that. So I do like the ideas behind these articles. I think they're actually pretty cool. Then we got Sleeping Tide. So this is our fiction, which we're not going to go through because that's a lot to read and I don't want to do it. So we're just going to move right on. RPG Maker, once again, advertised in Dragon Magazine. And again, I keep saying this, but I have the PlayStation Classic, and that's the only one of my classic consoles I'd be willing to try to add stuff to. And I think RPG Maker would have to be something that I add to that. An article on facing off against fiends. So it just basically recommends like certain spells to take, things like Dispel Evil, Protection from Evil, Banishment, having things like Holy Water, Paladins using Smite Evil, stuff like that. These are cool articles, but again, I'm not going to get into it too much there. There is some redundancy too, between the different the sections of the article there as well. Then we got some Lost Treasures of Cormyr. So we've got the Rallyhorn Riches. So again, just some more Forgotten Realms stuff with the Forgotten Realms setting about to release. Then we have the Ancestral Avenger. Okay, so this is something we're going to get into here a little bit. We're not going to read every single little bit of it here, but this is a prestige class for 3.0, and I don't recall seeing this in any of the 3.5 books that I have. So this may have been reprinted in something like Masters of the Wild, but I don't think that it was. So the Ancestral Adventure, so most everyone knows that Surface Elves hate the Drow. Okay, so these are basically focusing on fighting Drow. There were some abilities actually in the Races of the Wild book, the racial substitution levels for the Elven Ranger that actually did give special bonuses and benefits against fighting the Servants of Lolth, which included like spiders and the Drow. So there were concepts similar to this that did appear later, but I don't think this class actually did. So to qualify for the Ancestral Avenger, you must be an elf or half-elf, a base attack bonus of 5, so fighter works best with this. Wilderness lore, 3 ranks, the alertness feat, the iron will feat, and the tracking feat. You roll d8s for hit dice with this particular class. Weapon and armor proficiencies, they are proficient with all simple and martial weapons, all types of armor, and with shields. Again, most prestige classes were kind of designed for multi-class characters, but this one you really could do as just a straight fighter, really, with the choice in feats there. I think alertness might be like a bonus fighter feat that they can take. Iron Will and Tracking I don't think are, but by the time you get up to 5th level, you would have had a 1st level feat and a 3rd level feat, so you could have been able to choose both of those by then. 3 ranks in Wilderness lore might be a little bit tougher, but also, again, if you took Ranger, for example, that would be even better because you get tracking automatically, and then you just have to take those 2 feats at 1st and 3rd level, and by the time you got to base attack bonus +5, so once you reach 6th level, you could take level 1 in this prestige class. So this is one of the, I'm not going to say rare examples of a single class prestige class, but you could easily qualify for this as a fighter or a ranger without having to multi-class into something else. So they get abilities such as underground tracking, which is just you'd be able to track underground as opposed to in nature. Then we get Drow Bane at 1st level, so +1 to hit, +1d6 to damage. And then that goes up to +2 and then 2d6, and then finally up to +3 to hit and +3d6 damage at 8th level in the Prestige class. It says this does stack with a Ranger's favorite enemy bonus. Remember, the favorite enemy bonus in 3.0 was pretty weak, so you definitely would want that to stack because otherwise it, again, just makes favorite enemy kind of useless. You don't actually have to have favorite enemy, though, so that's kind of interesting. For this prestige class. Then you have poison resistance. Drow do like to use poison. Specifically, they like to use the sleep poison that they put on their hand crossbow bolts. So an Ancestral Avenger gains a resistance bonus equal to her Ancestral Avenger class level to saves versus poison from spiders or poison manufactured by the Drow. Overcomes Drow spell resistance. Okay, this is actually kind of cool. Ancestral Avengers of 3rd level and higher gain a +2 bonus to overcome the spell resistance of Drow and Driders. This bonus is cumulative with a bonus gain from spell penetration feat and is a supernatural ability. So I don't know how many Ranger spells would really be useful, like that you would have to worry about spell resistance, but the fact that you can overcome it is still pretty cool. And if you were like a multi-class fighter, like magic user, like a cleric or a wizard, then that would actually be pretty good. Spider Bane. At 5th level, the Ancestral Avenger can use her Drow Bane bonuses against any type of spider, as well as in the arena, Driders, Retrievers, and Bebeliths. So that's kind of cool. Retrievers and Bebeliths are demons. Web blocking. At 6th level, the Ancestral Avenger can ignore web spells and spider webbing as if affected by a freedom of movement spell. He can walk along webs as if on solid ground with no balance check required. Drowic Change. At 7th level, the Ancestral Avenger can alter her appearance to that of a drow. This supernatural ability functions as the spell Alter Self as if it were cast by a sorcerer of the Ancestral Avenger's class level, so they can try to pose as drow to get closer to them. Demon Bane. At 8th level, the Ancestral Avenger can use her Drow Bane bonuses against any type of chaotic evil outsider. This is a supernatural ability. And at 10th level, they gain spell resistance equal to 10 plus their class level, so up to a maximum of 20 as a supernatural ability. So that's actually kind of a cool prestige class. I like that one. Heroes of the Persian War. So, Xerxes. You actually have the stats for Xerxes, the king of Persia. Obviously not based off of the Xerxes from the 300 movie, because that didn't come out yet. But Xerxes was a 10th level human fighter, strength 16, dex 11, con 14, intelligence 13, wisdom 12, charisma 15. What do you have for feats? Far shot, improved critical on short sword, iron will, leadership, makes sense. Point blank shot, rapid shot, toughness, weapon focus short bow, weapon specialization short bow, weapon focus short sword, and specialization short sword. So that's actually kind of cool. Yeah, I actually like these. Having like real world, individuals appear as like D&D characters is kind of neat. Here we have Leonidas, and that actually kind of looks almost like a little bit like Gerard Butler, who played Leonidas in the 300 movie. So that actually looks kind of close. So he's a 7th level human fighter, but a 17 strength, 12 dex, 16 con, 12 intelligence, 14 wisdom, and an 18 charisma. This guy's kind of stacked. Feats, leadership, precise shot, weapon focus short bow, weapon specialization short bow, weapon focus short spear, there we go, as a Spartan, weapon specialization short spear, weapon focus short sword, there's short sword, and weapon specialization. So he's really focused on those 3 weapons, which is, again, these are kind of cool. I like these. PC portraits, Dragon Mirth, so just some weird kind of like single panel comics. Here we got a Mind Flayer and a Drow. The Mind Flayer's got his hand on this guy's head. It says, the prisoner is thinking that I look like a squid. I think these were caption contests. I want to say, I think these were things that you could send in captions for, maybe. We got the Beholder and an interplanar staring contest. He's turned one of them to stone. So, and then we got a Medusa there as well. So it says, it looks like a great match tonight. We'll be bringing you the action that we can indirectly look at. Right, Harv? And he was the one that was turned into the statue. So I love those. Those are cool. And then Nodwick again. Twin peaks, but twin barrier peaks. Nodwick was great as well. Question of the month, in defense of Dragon Punk. Question of the month, what role will psionics play in your campaign after the release of the Psionics Handbook? I think the next issue was actually about psionics, and I did a video on the 3.0 Psionics Handbook if you want to see that one. It was not great, we'll just put it that way. Role model, so again, a section in the magazines giving you tips on essentially how to paint minis. I kind of wish I would have had these articles back when I started trying to paint minis, but they give you good, really good advice. Choosing a battle cry, and then sage advice. So this month, the sage ponders several magical enigmas. Okay, I'm not going to go through all of these, but I do want to take a look at least 1 or 2 of them. So it says here, the player's handbook. So people would send in questions that the sage would clarify. I think sage advice is even still something that's ongoing to this day in the Dragon Plus, the online kind of thing, is a shadow of what Dragon Magazine was. But I think sage advice is actually still in there. So the thing that was sent in was, the player's handbook says the sorcerer class casts arcane spells by virtue of raw magical talent or gift, as opposed to a wizard's academic systemic approach. If this is the case, can a sorcerer cast a spell that requires a material component or a focus without using the component or focus? That's actually a pretty good question, because the point of the sorcerer is that their magic is inherent ability. So the way that it was kind of worded, you could make a strong case that material components weren't as important. However, the answer here is no. A sorcerer has a natural talent or gift for arcane spells, but that talent or gift only allows the sorcerer to cast a spell without preparing it ahead of time. So it's not necessarily at odds with the way they're presented, but it's a much needed clarification, definitely. If you were to watch a wizard and sorcerer casting the same spell, you could not tell just by looking which was the sorcerer and which was the wizard. Not even a successful spellcraft check would reveal that. The sorcerer uses all the components, the spell requirements, verbal, somatic, and material, and uses them the same way that a wizard does. Of course, either caster can use a feat to make the component unnecessary, such as still spell to eliminate a spell's somatic component. So yeah, that's actually kind of interesting because the sorcerer is never really presented that way. I don't think even today they're really presented that way. So yeah, it's kind of like, again, I wish that description would have been in the sorcerer class, that they can inherently cast like magical spells without having to ritualize it the way that wizards do. But yeah, that's actually a really good question and a really good answer. So I do like these, and a lot of the sage advice, things that they would choose to print were actually really well like thought out questions for the most part. So here's another one here. It says the player's handbook says a spell's range is the maximum distance from the caster the spell's effect can occur. It also says that if any portion of the spell's area would extend beyond the range, that area is wasted. Does that mean that if a character casts Fireball so that its point of origin is at the spell's maximum range, the area that would be affected by the Fireball would only be the hemisphere from the point of the origin back toward the caster? Would half the spell's volume be wasted? So I got to be honest, that's something I never enforced in my D&D campaign. So I don't even recall reading that in the book, but obviously it was there. It was in the book. It's just something that I probably glossed over or completely forgot. So it says, yes, part of the fireball is wasted. No portion of a fireball spread can be out of the spell's range. You can't squeeze a few extra feet of range out of a spell by placing the spell's point of origin at the maximum range. Note that this is a departure from the way the previous editions of the game did things. And that's probably why I never really focused on reading that part of spellcasting in 3rd edition, because I was familiar with the way that it worked in 2nd. So yeah, those are some really cool questions and really interesting answers to have there as well. So I do like that. And then we got dungeon craft. So we just have some stuff for like designing dungeons. What's new with Phil and Dixie, an advertisement once again for a Magic the Gathering novel. And at the back we have Eternal Ring, what looks like another RPG for the Sony PlayStation. So yeah, really cool stuff. I like this issue quite a bit. And again, I know I didn't focus too much on the elf specific stuff, but that is because in the near future I do want to do a video, or even a series of videos going over like the racial articles from Dragon Magazine. So about the dwarf, about the elf. I think I have the halfling and gnome issues as well, and maybe even compare them to their descriptions in things like Race of Stone, Race of Destiny, Race of the Wild, and so on. So I will be focusing more on those articles in a future video. But if you want me to cover anything else in this issue of Dragon Magazine in more detail, let me know that in the comments below. I think unfortunately, I think we're at the point where we probably won't have any more D&D movie specific articles. There might be a couple more left, but we're getting to the point where the movie's already out at this point, so they probably won't be talking about it much after the next issue or so. But I hope you guys enjoyed, and let me know if you had this issue back in the day. How much of the stuff on elves did you actually incorporate into your campaign? Did you actually start using the elven words that were presented here in your games, or was that something that was just fun to read and never actually used like the way that I would probably read the article, love it, and never really use it in a D&D campaign? But yeah, awesome stuff. Thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you all next time. Until then, take care.